Je m'appelle Max Sherman. Je suis devant le mémorial de l'école secondaire Kitsilano, de la catastrophe du navire canadien de Sa Majesté HMCS Kootenay. The Kootenay was built at the Burrard Dry Docks in North Vancouver and launched in 1954. On October 23, 1969, the Kootenay was operating in European waters with the Canadian Task Group when an engine room explosion and fire killed 7 sailors and injured 53 others. Cet événement est considéré comme étant le pire accident de la Marine Royale Canadienne. It was marked as the last time Canadian military personnel were buried overseas, as 4 of the sailors killed were buried in the UK. Following the disaster, policy was changed so that all Canadian military personnel are returned to Canada, should they perish while on deployment. The tragedy marked a turning point in the Canadian naval policy. Surrounding fire prevention and damage control resulted in changes including more onboard equipment placed in key locations throughout the ships, and more frequent and vigorous equipment inspections and maintenance. The tradition of allowing Canadian sailors to wear beards aboard ship was suspended after the explosion of the HMCS Kootenay because of the increased casualties from poorly fitted masks. It was not reinstalled until later, when new qualifications and testing were introduced. Sailors must now be clean-shaven during sea duty, but are allowed to have trim beards while ashore. Le 23 octobre 2002, la Marine canadienne royale a inauguré un nouveau centre d'instruction en matière de lutte contre les avaries Kootenay à Halifax.
There are 3 main branches of the Canadian Armed Forces: the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Navy. Canadian men and women serve and sacrifice themselves in a wide variety of roles within each of these branches. Today we are going to tell you about the story of what happened on Her Majesty's Canadian submarine Chicoutimi in 2004.
The HMCS Chicoutimi is one of 4 used submarines that Canada purchased from Britain in the late 1990s. On October 5, 2004, while under the command of the Royal Canadian Navy, a fire broke out on the submarine. This fire resulted in the death of 1 crew member, Lieutenant Chris Saunders, a combat system engineer aboard the submarine. Many other members suffered injuries due to the inhalation of toxic fumes.
So what's the story behind this tragedy? In 1998, Canada wanted to replace their aging Oberon-class submarines, so they purchased second-hand submarines of the Upholder class from Britain. These used submarines required extensive repair and reactivation work. HMCS Chicoutimi, the oldest of the 4, took the longest to repair and refit. It was finally accepted into the Royal Canadian Navy on the 2nd of October 2004.
On October 4th, 2004, a crew member on the HMCS Chicoutimi discovered a loose nut on the upper vent of the submarine's conning tower on their maiden voyage towards Halifax. The crew members had 2 options to carry out the repair work. 1. Run the submarine with the upper and lower hatches open, or 2. Close the arena off by shutting the lower lid, which would lock the technicians out of the sub. The Chicoutimi's commanding officer, Captain Luc Pelletier, decided to leave the hatches open.
25 minutes après le début du travail de réparation, le sous-marin a été rempli de 2000 litres d'eau de mer en raison d'une vague massive. 2 heures plus tard, un incendie électrique s'est déclaré dans la cabine du capitaine et s'est rapidement propagé à une station électrique située en dessous.
Despite the fire being quickly contained, 9 crew members suffered smoke inhalation. This incident took place in rough waters off the coast of Ireland. In the following morning, doctors were transferred onto the Chicoutimi to examine the injured men. 3 crew members needed immediate medical evacuation. 2 of these crew members were boarded onto a helicopter without incident. But as the 3rd crew member, 32-year-old Lieutenant Chris Saunders, was evacuated, something went wrong. The gravity of Lieutenant Saunders' condition was discovered too late. Sadly, he didn't make it. Lieutenant Saunders died while being transferred to the hospital. And now a few words about Lieutenant Saunders. Chris Saunders graduated from high school in St. John, New Brunswick with honors. He was a part of the Army Reserves throughout those high school years when he received full scholarship to military college. He attended Collège Militaire Royal de Saint-Jean in Quebec.
Après avoir obtenu son diplôme de l'école militaire, Chris a été stationné à Halifax où il a travaillé comme ingénieur des systèmes de combat. Il a également servi sur d'autres navires de guerre au cours de sa carrière. Il aimait passionnément l'armée. He also loved baseball, golf, mountain biking, and of course the family he left behind. Christopher was married to his wife Gwen, and they had 2 young sons at the time of his death.
What we would also like to underscore is the lasting effects of this tragedy on the crew. Many of Saunders' fellow crew members, the submariners left on the vessel after he was evacuated, were later found to have significantly higher rates of PTSD, asthma, and depression. In a recently released military health survey, it was reported that 60% of the 56 crew members on board the HMCS Chicoutimi suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. Clearly, it was a harrowing experience for all on board. This is Debbie Sullivan. Mrs. Sullivan is the mother of Lieutenant Christopher Saunders. She was awarded a medal called the Silver Cross in 2020.
Le 11 novembre de l'année dernière, Madame Sullivan a été appelée à déposer une couronne au pied du monument commémoratif de guerre du Canada au nom de toutes les mères canadiennes qui ont perdu un fils ou une fille lors d'opérations militaires ou dans l'exercice de leurs fonctions normales. En tant que mère nationale de la Croix du Souvenir, Madame Sullivan a aussi accompli d'autres fonctions officielles au cours de la dernière année, rendant aussi hommage aux disparus de tous les conflits. Quelle est l'histoire de la Croix d'argent? Le 1er décembre 1919, la Croix du Souvenir, aussi connue sous le nom de la Croix d'argent, a été initialement approuvée par le gouvernement du Canada. Elle a été décernée aux mères et veuves des soldats ou marins canadiens morts au champ d'honneur pour honorer le souvenir de leurs chers disparus. De nos jours, la Légion canadienne choisit la mère de la Croix d'argent pour représenter les mères du Canada à la cérémonie du jour du souvenir qui se tient le 11 novembre à Ottawa.
Today, as we think about the tragedy of the HMCS Chicoutimi, we would like to recognize and honor the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces who have served and sacrificed for our country, and the families of these brave Canadians as well.